You know that feeling when you spend 8 hours on a Sunday crafting the perfect smoked brisket chili, only to show up Monday and find your container gone? The thief isn't a hungry intern. It's the vice president pulling in $300,000 a year with an unlimited expense account who decided your homemade lunch was a leadership perk. When you confronted him, he threatened your job. When you went to HR, they told you that labeling your food creates a hostile environment. That's when you realized the rules weren't going to protect you, but a deep knowledge of cooking and a tiny bottle of ghost pepper extract with a skull on the label absolutely could. You made the most beautiful, most dangerous bowl of chili you'd ever cooked, and you placed it in the fridge on the exact day the entire board of directors was visiting. What happened next turned the most feared man in the office into a grown man crawling across the conference room floor, sobbing, begging for milk, in front of everyone who ever feared him. You know that feeling when you were looking forward to something so simple, so pure, and someone just rips it away from you? I am talking about lunch, the 1 hour of freedom in a soul-sucking corporate wasteland. You sit at your desk all morning, staring at spreadsheets until your eyes cross, typing emails that mean absolutely nothing, and the only thing keeping you tethered to your sanity is the knowledge that at noon, you get to eat something delicious. My name is not important, but my story is. I work at a mid-sized logistics firm in a dreary suburb. It is exactly as boring as it sounds. We have gray carpets that always look slightly damp, beige walls that drain the life out of you, and fluorescent lights that hum a constant annoying note and give you a splitting headache by 2 in the afternoon. Enter Richard. Richard is the vice president of regional sales. Richard is also a massive, entitled man-child. Everyone hates him. Everyone. Even the stray cat that hangs around the loading dock hisses when he walks by. Richard drives a bright yellow sports car. It is the ugliest shade of yellow you have ever seen, like a bruised banana. And of course, he parks this monstrosity diagonally across 2 prime parking spots right near the front door. Every single day, he wears suits that probably cost $2,000 but fit him like a cheap garbage bag. He wears so much cologne that you can taste it in the back of your throat 10 minutes after he leaves a room. It smells like crushed pine needles mixed with pure desperation. And his laugh, oh my God, his laugh. It is this loud, braying donkey noise that echoes over the cubicle walls. He throws around corporate buzzwords like they make him sound smart. He is always telling us to synergize our bandwidth or pivot our paradigms. Shut up, Richard. You sell shipping crates. You are not a visionary. I am not a rich guy. I make a very average salary and rent is high. But my one major passion in life, my one true hobby, is cooking. I love to cook. It is my therapy. I spend my Sunday afternoons in my tiny apartment kitchen prepping amazing meals for the week. I do not do sad turkey sandwiches or microwave noodle cups. I am talking about Wagyu beef meatballs, saffron risotto, slow-roasted pork shoulder with homemade barbecue sauce. I bring these masterpieces into the office in nice glass containers. It is the highlight of my day. One Tuesday, about 6 months ago, I was having a particularly brutal morning. Clients were yelling at me, my phone would not stop ringing, and all I wanted was to sit in the break room and eat my lunch. I had made a beautiful, slow-braised short rib pasta. I cooked those ribs for 8 hours on Sunday until the meat just melted off the bone. I walked into the break room, opened the communal fridge, and looked on my usual shelf. My glass container was gone. I stood there for a solid minute, just staring at the empty space next to a jar of expired mayonnaise. I looked behind the milk. I looked in the crisper drawer. Gone. I was furious. I had to walk down the street in the rain and buy a sad, soggy wrap from a gas station. It tasted like cardboard and defeat. I thought maybe someone made a mistake. Maybe someone grabbed the wrong bag. But the next week, it happened again. This time, it was my homemade chicken tikka masala with garlic naan. I spent 3 hours making that sauce from scratch. I toasted my own spices. I was fuming. I started asking around. The office receptionist, Sarah, is a sweet older lady who sees everything. I asked her if she noticed anyone carrying a glass bowl with orange sauce. She looked around nervously, leaned in, and whispered that she saw Richard eating it at his desk. Richard, the vice president. The guy makes at least $300,000 a year. He gets massive bonuses. He has an unlimited corporate expense account. Why in the world is he stealing my food? I decided to confront him. I am a reasonable guy. I figured maybe he actually thought it was catering left over from a meeting. I walked up to his corner office. The walls are entirely glass, so you can see him in there, usually practicing his golf swing. I knocked on the door. He was sitting at his desk, literally picking his teeth with a plastic flosser. Gross. I stepped inside and said, very politely, that I think there might have been a mix-up, and he accidentally took my lunch from the fridge. Richard stopped flossing, leaned back in his giant leather chair, and smirked. He did not look embarrassed at all. He looked amused. He told me that the fridge is communal property. He said, and I am quoting him word for word here, that whatever is placed in the communal fridge is considered a leadership perk. A leadership perk. My homemade chicken tikka masala is a leadership perk. I just stared at him. I asked him if he was joking. His smile vanished. He leaned forward and told me that if I have a problem with sharing, maybe I am not a team player. He dropped a heavy, not-so-subtle hint that the upcoming annual performance reviews are heavily based on team synergy and corporate culture fit. He basically threatened to fire me, or at least tank my raise, over a plate of chicken. He told me to close the door on my way out. I was shaking when I walked back to my desk. I have never felt rage like that in my entire life. It was not just about the food anymore. It was about the utter lack of respect. This guy had everything. The giant house, the stupid yellow car, the ridiculous salary, and he still wanted my lunch. It was a power trip. He loved knowing he was eating something that belonged to a subordinate. He enjoyed putting me in my place. I decided to go to human resources. We have a lady in HR named Pam. Pam is completely useless. Her office is covered in those motivational posters with bald eagles and mountains. I sat down and explained the situation. I told her Richard was stealing my lunches and threatened my job when I confronted him. Pam sighed, adjusted her glasses, and told me that we have a strict no-labels policy in the fridge because labels create a hostile and exclusionary environment. Are you kidding me? A hostile environment? What about the guy literally robbing me of my property? Pam said that since I could not definitively prove he stole it, and because Richard is a senior executive, there was nothing she could do. She suggested I start bringing foods that do not look so appetizing. She blamed me. She blamed my cooking skills for tempting him. I left her office feeling entirely defeated. For the next 3 weeks, I ate terrible food. I brought plain rice and beans in opaque plastic tubs. Richard ignored them. He went back to stealing sandwiches from the marketing department. I watched him. He had a pattern. He never stole the cheap stuff. He only targeted the good stuff, the things that smelled amazing, the rich, heavy gourmet meals. He was a predator, and the break room fridge was his hunting ground. That is when I realized I could not win by playing by the rules. HR was not going to help me. My boss was not going to help me. I had to handle this myself. I am not a violent guy. I do not know martial arts. I am not going to key his ugly car. But I know food, I know chemistry, and I know how to make a grown man cry. I started doing research. I wanted to teach him a lesson he would never, ever forget. I wanted him to regret the day he decided my lunch was his personal buffet. I looked into spicy food. Now, I love spicy food. I can handle a habanero pepper without breaking a sweat, but I needed something nuclear. I researched the Carolina Reaper, the hottest pepper in the world. But cooking with fresh reapers is tricky, and the heat can sometimes cook out or be diluted by fats and dairy. Then I found it, the holy grail of suffering. Ghost pepper extract, pure, concentrated, unadulterated fire in a tiny glass dropper bottle. Millions of Scoville heat units. It is not even meant to be used as a condiment. It is meant to be used as an additive for massive vats of commercial chili, like 1 drop per 50 gallons. The website I bought it from made me check a box acknowledging that they were not legally responsible for any bodily harm caused by the product. Perfect. I ordered a bottle with 2-day shipping. Now I needed the perfect vehicle for the extract. It had to be something dark, rich, and heavily spiced so it would hide the sinister chemical taste of the extract. It had to look incredibly expensive and irresistible. It had to be the crown jewel of the break room fridge. I decided on a Texas-style smoked brisket chili. Sunday arrived. I went to the fancy butcher downtown and bought 2 pounds of prime beef brisket. I spent $40 just on the meat. I was fully committed at this point. This was not a lunch. This was a tactical strike. I smoked the brisket on my balcony for 6 hours until it had a beautiful, dark bark. I chopped it up and threw it into a heavy cast-iron pot with crushed tomatoes, dark kidney beans, roasted garlic, smoked paprika, cumin, and a heavy pour of dark stout beer. The smell in my apartment was heavenly. It was the best chili I had ever made. Then it was time for the secret ingredient. The ghost pepper extract had arrived in a small cardboard tube packed with bubble wrap. The bottle itself had a warning label featuring a skull and crossbones. I am not an idiot, so I took precautions. I put on a pair of thick blue latex gloves. I dug out a pair of clear plastic safety goggles from my toolbox. I turned on the exhaust fan above my stove to maximum power. I twisted the cap off the tiny bottle. Immediately, my eyes started watering. The fumes rising from this tiny vial were caustic. It smelled like danger. I started coughing. My throat felt scratchy, just breathing the air in my kitchen. I used the glass dropper and hovered over the pot of simmering chili. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops. I stopped at 10. 10 drops of pure, liquid agony. I stirred it into the thick red sauce. A tiny, microscopic droplet splashed up and landed on my bare wrist above the glove. Within seconds, it felt like someone was pressing a lit cigarette into my skin. I had to scrub my arm with dish soap and cold water for 5 minutes to stop the burning. I looked at the pot. It looked like a normal, delicious chili. It smelled like a normal, delicious chili. But I knew the truth. It was a bowl of weaponized magma. I carefully ladled a massive portion into my nicest glass container with a snap-on lid. I put it in my fridge overnight to let the flavors and the heat meld together. I barely slept that night. I was a bundle of nerves. What if someone else ate it? What if Dave from accounting, who has chronic heartburn and is generally a really nice guy, decided to steal my lunch? I would feel terrible. Dave does not deserve to be hospitalized. But I knew Dave brought a sad little turkey sandwich every day. The only person bold enough to steal a premium glass bowl of smoked brisket chili was Richard. Thursday morning arrived. Thursday was a very important day at the firm. Why? Because the corporate board of directors was visiting from out of state. 7 old, incredibly wealthy men in tailored bespoke suits were walking around our office, judging our quarterly metrics. They are the people who decide if Richard gets his massive year-end bonus. Richard had been frantic all morning. He was sweating through his expensive dress shirt, running around the office, yelling at junior staff to clean up their desks, kissing the boots of the board members. He was trying so hard to look like the ultimate alpha male executive in front of them. He was practically vibrating with stress and arrogance. At exactly 8 in the morning, I walked into the break room and placed the glass bowl on the middle shelf of the fridge, right at eye level. I left the lid slightly cracked, just a fraction of an inch, so the rich, smoky scent of the brisket would waft out every time someone opened the door. It was a trap, baited and set. I went back to my desk. I could not focus on my spreadsheets. My leg was bouncing up and down like a jackhammer. My heart was pounding in my ears. The anticipation was killing me. Every time someone walked toward the break room, I held my breath. I watched Sarah, the receptionist, go in. She came out with her yogurt. I breathed a sigh of relief. I watched Dave from accounting go in. He came out with his sad sandwich. Safe. The morning dragged on. It felt like 100 years passed. At exactly 12:15, the board of directors moved into the main glass conference room for a working lunch. The conference room is right in the center of the office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass walls, so everyone can see inside. It is designed to look modern and transparent, but really it is just an aquarium where the executives can look down on us. I saw Richard excuse himself from the conference room. He walked with that arrogant, swinging strut toward the break room. He did not even look around. He did not check to see if anyone was watching. He just pushed the door open. I slowly stood up from my desk and casually walked toward the copy machine, which gave me a direct line of sight into the break room. Richard opened the fridge. He saw the chili. I saw him pause. I saw him lean in and smell it. A giant, greedy smile spread across his face. He grabbed my glass bowl. He did not hesitate. He walked over to the microwave and punched in 2 minutes. While the microwave hummed, he stood there tapping his expensive leather shoes on the linoleum, looking incredibly pleased with himself. The smell of the chili began to fill the office space. It smelled phenomenal. People were actually popping their heads up over their cubicles. Richard took the bowl out of the microwave. It was steaming. He grabbed a heavy metal spoon from the drawer, turned around, and walked straight into the glass conference room where the 7 board members and our local chief executive officer were sitting. Richard took the empty seat right next to the CEO. He placed the steaming bowl of stolen chili right in front of him. I abandoned the copy machine. I pretended to be organizing a stack of files on a nearby cabinet, but my eyes were locked on that glass wall. My hands were actually shaking. The oh crap moment had arrived. There was no going back now. Richard was talking animatedly, using his hands, probably spouting nonsense about synergy and market capture. The board members were nodding politely. Richard picked up his spoon. He dug deep into the bowl, getting a massive, heaping spoonful of brisket, beans, and thick sauce. He blew on it once. He shoved the entire spoonful into his mouth. He chewed. He swallowed. For 3 seconds, absolutely nothing happened. The ghost pepper extract is sneaky. It hides in the fats of the meat and the oils of the sauce. It lulls you into a false sense of security. Richard turned his head to answer a question from the board chairman. He opened his mouth to speak, and then it hit him. I watched the exact moment his soul left his body. His eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. He froze completely stiff, like someone had just hit pause on a remote control. The color of his face changed. It went from pale to a light pink to a bright cherry red, and finally settled on a terrifying shade of deep crimson that usually indicates a severe stroke. The veins in his forehead and his neck bulged out like thick blue ropes. He did not say a word. He could not speak. His vocal cords were currently submerged in liquid fire. He dropped his spoon. It clattered loudly against the polished mahogany table, startling the CEO. Richard grabbed his glass of ice water and chugged the entire thing in 2 massive gulps. But water does not help capsaicin oil. Water is the worst thing you can drink. It just acts like a slip and slide, spreading the fiery oil all over your tongue, your gums, and down the back of your throat. The heat amplified. Richard started making this horrible, raspy, gasping noise, like a pug that just ran a marathon. He stood up from his leather chair, but his knees immediately buckled. He stumbled sideways, his hands flailing, and knocked his chair completely over. It crashed into the wall. The board members stopped talking. All 7 of these distinguished, wealthy old men were staring at Richard in absolute shock. The CEO reached out and touched his arm, asking if he was choking, asking if he needed a doctor. Richard could not answer. Drool, thick strings of saliva, was literally falling from his bottom lip, dripping onto his $2,000 silk tie. He looked like a rabid dog. He started tearing wildly at his collar. He ripped a button clean off his expensive dress shirt. He was panting, his chest heaving, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for an exit. Sweat was pouring down his face, completely ruining his gelled hair. He dropped to his knees. The vice president of regional sales, a man who just yesterday told me my lunch was a leadership perk, was now crawling on the expensive gray carpet of the executive conference room. He was sobbing. Actual genuine tears were streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat and the copious amounts of snot pouring freely from his nose. He managed to croak out one single pathetic word. Milk. He clawed his way toward the glass door. He pushed it open and dragged himself out of the conference room. He was crawling on all fours down the main hallway toward the break room. The entire office had stopped working. 50 people were standing at their cubicles, watching in stunned, glorious silence as this tyrant wept and crawled across the floor. He made it into the break room. I followed him, standing by the doorway. He reached up, grabbed the handle of the fridge, and pulled himself up. He ripped the door open. He blindly grabbed a half-empty carton of milk that belonged to Sarah, the receptionist. He did not even bother finding a glass. He did not even try to drink it properly. He tore the cardboard spout open and poured the freezing cold milk directly onto his face. It cascaded over his eyes, his nose, and into his open, gasping mouth. White milk splashed all over his ruined shirt, his suit jacket, and puddled on the linoleum floor. He collapsed backward, sitting in the puddle of spilled milk, leaning against the cabinets, panting and crying. He was completely, utterly destroyed. The CEO and the board members had followed him out. They stood in the hallway looking into the break room, watching this grown man roll around in a puddle of dairy and his own fluids. The chairman of the board, a very stern-looking man with white hair, looked at the CEO and asked very quietly, what exactly was wrong with his vice president? The CEO looked mortified. He had no answer. Someone called the paramedics. They arrived 10 minutes later with a stretcher. By that time, the worst of the heat had started to subside, but Richard was still shivering, covered in milk, and clutching his stomach because the chili had hit his digestive tract. They loaded him onto the stretcher. As they wheeled him past my desk, he looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot and swollen shut. He knew. I knew he knew. I just gave him a very polite corporate smile and went back to typing on my keyboard. The aftermath was beautiful. Richard claimed he was poisoned. He officially filed a complaint with Human Resources, demanding an investigation. He claimed a disgruntled employee was trying to assassinate him. Pam in HR called the police. The police took the remaining chili from the glass bowl and sent it to a lab to be tested for toxins, heavy metals, and poisons. 3 days later, the results came back. The police informed Pam that there was absolutely no poison in the food. It was just a highly concentrated amount of capsaicin. It was, legally and factually, just very, very spicy food. Pam called me into her office. She looked nervous. She asked me if the chili was mine. I sat down in the chair, looked at her motivational eagle poster, and said, yes, it was my chili. I told her that I love incredibly spicy food. I told her that my family comes from a long line of spice enthusiasts, and that I build up my tolerance over years. I told her I had been looking forward to eating my delicious, expensive smoked brisket chili all morning, and I was incredibly distressed to find that it had been stolen yet again. I looked Pam dead in the eyes and asked her, is Richard going to reimburse me for the $40 worth of prime brisket he stole? Pam was speechless. She stuttered. She tried to say that I purposely booby-trapped the food. I stopped her right there. I reminded her of our previous conversation. I reminded her that she specifically told me we cannot use labels. I reminded her that she specifically told me there was no proof Richard was stealing my food. I told her that if Richard chose to eat an unmarked bowl of food from a communal fridge without knowing what was in it, that was his own risk. I was just bringing my own lunch, tailored to my own unique dietary preferences, to my place of employment. I asked her if she was discriminating against my culinary culture. Pam backed down instantly. She knew I had her boxed into a corner created by her own lazy corporate policies. The best part? The absolute cherry on top of this beautiful revenge sundae? The board of directors. The CEO had to explain to the board why their star executive had a complete mental and physical breakdown in the middle of a presentation. He had to tell them the truth because the police report was filed. He had to admit that his vice president of regional sales, a man making hundreds of thousands of dollars, was systematically stealing lunches from junior employees out of the communal fridge and accidentally stole a bowl of extremely spicy chili. The board was disgusted, not because of the chili, but because of the petty theft. These men deal in millions of dollars. To them, an executive stealing a sandwich from a clerk shows a massive lack of integrity and judgment. It showed he was a liability. It made the entire executive team look like a joke. Richard was out on medical leave for 2 days due to severe gastrointestinal distress. I am talking about Ring of Fire bathroom nightmares. When he finally returned to the office on Monday, the atmosphere had completely shifted. No one was afraid of him anymore. You cannot fear a man you watched crawl on the floor crying for milk. People were openly snickering when he walked by. Someone actually left a baby pacifier on his desk. By Wednesday, Richard was called into the glass conference room with the CEO and an external legal team. The blinds were drawn. An hour later, Richard walked out, carrying a cardboard box filled with his personal items. He did not say a word to anyone. He did not have his usual arrogant strut. He looked down at his expensive shoes, walked out the front door, got into his ugly yellow sports car, and drove away. The official company line was that Richard left to pursue other strategic opportunities. But Sarah, the receptionist, told me the truth. They forced him to resign or face termination for gross misconduct and creating a toxic work environment. The office has been a paradise ever since. The new vice president is a quiet lady who brings her own lunch in a cooler bag and says, "Thank you" when you hold the door for her. The fridge is a safe zone. No one touches my glass containers. Sometimes, when I am eating my perfectly seared Wagyu meatballs in the break room, I look over at the spot on the floor where Richard poured milk onto his own face, and I smile. You know, they say, revenge is a dish best served cold. But I disagree. I think revenge is a dish best served steaming hot, packed with ghost pepper extract, and eaten right in front of the board of directors.